Welcome to another explainer, where we're going to unpack the cultural mechanics of drum and bass. Just think for a second about the absolute sheer contrast we're dealing with here. We're talking about a sound that was forged in the damp brickwork and sweaty basements of 90s London, right? And now, it's commanding main stages at massive global festivals, from Tokyo all the way to Los Angeles. Today, we're pulling from a really rich mix of historical texts, academic analysis, club retrospectives, and first-hand accounts to trace this completely wild trajectory. It's just a fascinating journey of how a highly localized, fiercely protective subculture, one built entirely on physical proximity and underground grit, somehow became the ubiquitous, high-octane soundtrack of our digital age.
So, to actually understand this sprawling global web, we really have to look at the fans themselves. In a massive Reddit thread that we're using as one of our primary sources today, fans were asked one simple question: how did you get into drum and bass? And honestly, when you read through the responses, there is no single linear trajectory. There's just this decentralized explosion of discoveries spanning decades. You've got the veterans reminiscing about trading battered rave cassette tapes in the schoolyard, others talking about tuning their antennas to catch illegal pirate radio broadcasts through the static, and then suddenly, this massive wave of fans realizing they discovered the entire genre while holding a PlayStation controller.
For instance, one user shared that they didn't even know what drum and bass was back then, but they'd always throw on the MSX FM station while playing Grand Theft Auto 3. And that perfectly captures this massive cultural shift. You had kids who had never set foot anywhere near a warehouse rave, and they were suddenly being hardwired to love syncopated breakbeats while outrunning virtual cops in their suburban living rooms. It was a complete culture shock. A localized, heavily guarded London subculture was unexpectedly taking over the world through completely decentralized digital discovery. It literally snuck into the global consciousness through the back door of video game consoles.
Let's move right into Section 1. The birth of ragajumban.
Well, before the video games and the global streaming metrics, there was a very specific, incredibly raw cultural moment bubbling out of the hardcore circuits of 1990s East London. Our source material from the text State of Bass actually delves into how this early sound solidified cultural unity in the face of a dominant white British culture. You see, ragajunga wasn't just dance music, it was the visceral sound of defiance. It was born straight from the socio-political tension of the era, drawing heavily from the Jamaican sound system tradition. It physically manifested in these underground spaces, mixing the posturing of hip-hop and dancehall with incredibly fast, aggressive electronic breakbeats. It gave disenfranchised youth a street-level lexicon, crossing racial barriers to forge a genuinely new, fiercely independent, multicultural British musical form.
Now, the true alchemy of this era boils down to a structural revelation: 160/80. Producers started taking rapid-fire, chaotic drum loops running at 160 beats per minute and anchoring them with deep, booming reggae dub bass lines running at exactly half that speed, so 80 beats per minute. This completely altered the physics of the dance floor. It meant the crowd could essentially choose how they wanted to interpret the rhythm. You could nod your head and skank slowly to that cavernous halftime bass, or you could move frantically to the double-time snare rushes. That specific tempo dynamic was an absolute game-changer, and it ended up defining the physical movement of the genre forever.
All right, let's jump into Section 2, Sound Systems, Dubplates, and MCs.
Think about the sheer extremity of the dubplate economy in those early days. We aren't just talking about VIP edits casually sent over an email link. We are talking about physical weapons cut onto acetate that literally decayed with every single spin. Producers would supply a select few DJs with these highly coveted, fragile discs. Getting a fresh cut from a legendary spot like Music House in North London meant you walked out with a sonic advantage no other DJ on the planet possessed. You had to physically be there, in the room, to experience that specific version of a track before the acetate wore down to absolutely nothing.
And as the scene exploded, a really fascinating friction emerged. You had the anonymous DJ, whose focus was purely on the mix, clashing stylistically with the celebrity MC, who was there to hype the crowd with lyrical dexterity. The early acid house and rave ethos was all about the music, right? The DJ was meant to be a shadowy, almost invisible figure in the booth. But jungle heavily embraced the reggae and hip-hop tradition of the frontman. MCs began demanding center stage, demanding the crowd make noise, and occasionally stepping on the toes of DJs who just wanted the breakbeats to do the talking. It really became a battle for the crowd's ultimate attention.
Which brings us to one of the most legendary flexes of the entire dubplate era. DJ Kenny Ken walked into a massive sound clash armed with a custom dubplate of the absolute anthem Original Nutta, but this version featured specific, personalized vocals recorded just for him.
I mean, the sheer madness of dropping a track that exclusively praises you by name sent the crowd into a total frenzy. Foghorns blaring, people screaming. Through sheer crowd reaction alone, Kenny Ken secured 10 consecutive wheel-ups in one night, 10 rewinds in a row. It was the ultimate utilization of MC culture and exclusive dubplate artillery to completely obliterate the competition. Okay, moving on to Section 3, building underground sanctuaries.
To actually house all this deafening energy, the culture needed very specific physical spaces. Take Vienna's legendary Flex Club, for example. Tracing its chronological evolution, Flex started in 1990 as a gritty DIY punk squad, but by 1995 it relocated directly into an abandoned subway tunnel along the Danube Canal. And that move was absolutely crucial. It allowed the venue to embrace the booming drum and bass scene pushing out of the UK, eventually cementing itself as the absolute epicenter of Austria's bass movement and a mandatory stop for the biggest international DJs.
Flex really represents the exact architectural blueprint needed for this subculture. It's definitely not about bottle service, VIP booths, or LED screens. No, it's about an elite, high-fidelity Alcon's audio sound system pumping immense sub-bass inside a raw, graffiti-covered concrete tunnel. And crucially, they enforce a strict no-photo policy. In an era of constant documentation, this acts as a really powerful gatekeeping mechanism. It protects the underground vibe and forces people to be entirely present in the music, capturing the fleeting, in-the-moment magic of those early London sound system clashes.
Next up is Section 4, Pirate Radio to PlayStation.
So how did this highly localized club culture actually broadcast itself to the rest of the world? Well, it certainly wasn't through traditional pop radio. According to our sources, the discovery methods were wildly diverse and deeply atmospheric. For some, it was the hiss of a sixth-generation copied cassette tape traded in a schoolyard. For others, it was the adrenaline of Wipeout's futuristic anti-gravity racing paired flawlessly with synthetic brakes. And today, the evolution continues digitally, with DJs like Dom Whiting throwing massive moving parties, live-streaming sets while literally riding a bicycle through city streets on YouTube.
But honestly, the sheer influence of those early pirate networks cannot be overstated. Call FM wasn't just the station broadcasting illegally from tower block roofs, it was a huge mobilizing force for the culture. Their reach was so profound that when they threw a third birthday party at the Astoria, 3,000 people packed the club to capacity and another 5,000 flooded the streets outside, completely shutting down Tottenham Court Road. The police were absolutely stunned. It was a true grassroots phenomenon, entirely bypassing the mainstream music industry to command an army of listeners. And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the global dance floor.
Our academic sources point to a truly fascinating paradox here. A genre that demands sweaty physical proximity is now somehow kept alive by borderless digital access. Drum and bass is inherently visceral. It's meant to be felt rattling in your chest through a massive rig. Yet today, fans in Tokyo, Los Angeles, and Sao Paulo are analyzing intricate double drops on YouTube and debating the nuances of liquid versus neurofunk on Reddit, entirely detached from the geographic origins of the sound. The physical culture has just seamlessly integrated into a digital framework. A sound built entirely on localized street energy became accessible to absolutely anyone with a Wi-Fi connection. The irony is incredible, isn't it? We went from an era where DJs would literally scratch the white labels off their records so rival selectors couldn't identify their tracks, to an era of instantaneous global streaming, where millions of people can hit play on a drop simultaneously. The intense secrecy and exclusivity of the 90s have been traded for ultimate digital ubiquity. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder, as you reflect on how a few acetate discs in London ultimately changed the soundtrack of the world. Can a culture truly remain underground when its most iconic anthems are featured in blockbuster video games and its entire history is meticulously archived online? How exactly does a scene rooted in rebellion maintain its edge when it belongs to everyone? Think about that the next time you hear a 160 BPM breakbeat roll through the speakers. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.